Hey, we're live here. Nalini Global, Randell Stroud. We're getting ready to have UFC legend Cung to join us to talk about some of his battles that he's been going through in his life and how he's doing his part to protect the rights of others, some of his trials, tribulations, and the things that he's overcome. And hopefully he'll be joining us here shortly. This live feed will take a while to connect with all of you guys. I really look forward to this conversation. I've been a fan of Cung Le's for quite some time. I'm just waiting for him to connect. So on today's show, we're going to talk with Cung Le, and he's going to tell us about his career in the martial arts, how certain things have changed, and we're also going to talk about some human rights abuses that have been going on in this country for a long time and worldwide. So be prepared for that as well. You may be shocked. A lot of people think that martial artists and fighters don't have a brain, they don't have a mind of their own, but they most certainly do. Let me see if I can get him patched in. I just sent him an invite. Should be a really good episode. Really look forward to it. So give us just a moment, guys, as Cung gets patched in. Should be a really interesting episode. I've been watching Cung Le since I was a kid. He's a brilliant fighter, a dedicated father, and former refugee from Vietnam. But he will have the opportunity to tell you all of that himself. Let me see. I think we may have lost a connection here. All right, I think I may have to end this this feed here. For some reason, it's not letting. Oh, there he is. I'm gonna invite Cung in.
How you doing?
Hey, what's going on, Mr. Le?
Wasn't letting me in at first, so
Well, we have a lot to talk about today, but before we get started, for anyone who has been sitting under a rock for the last 20 years and doesn't know much about martial arts, give us a quick rundown on who is Cung Le and what is your background?
Cung Le. I'm talking about myself in like a third party, but yeah, I'm former Strikeforce middleweight champion. I fought for the UFC. I was under contract with them for almost 5 years, and then I pushed hard to get released from them, and it took about a year and change, and now I'm fighting for 1,200 plus UFC fighters on this anti lawsuit against them, and then I'm pushing Ollie acts from boxing to MMA, so all the fighters can basically have like fair market and get paid what they're worth. Like some of these guys are top 10 and they're fighting and they're I'm not even sure if they're making six figures, while boxers, if they're in the top 10, they're making real good money. So it's just MMAFA and just the cause, and plus all this crazy violence. First, it started with like the Asian people. Now it's like now it's the blacks. It's just crazy. Yeah, you name it, it's happening. uh,
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people don't realize that, you know, you are a martial artist, you are this fighter, you are a figure that a lot of people look up to, but they don't realize that you have this human rights element to you when it comes to fighters. A lot of them, they fight their hearts out, and their bodies get used up, and they get injured, and then they have nobody to take care of them. I mean, how many boxers have we seen, and then now MMA fighters who have given their lives, they have all these injuries, and then you see them riding a taxi somewhere, barely making it, and there's no help for them. And I saw that you have spearheaded this movement to give MMA fighters, in particular in the UFC, more bargaining power. And a lot of people are angry about that. I mean, have you gotten any anonymous threats or anything? Because you are, I mean, facing a Goliath here.
No threats. But it's just not just me, right? I joined in because, when before I retired, the allegations of me using HGH was, kind of just like it threw me off because before that I was the company man. I did this. I was like the face of UFC in Asia, in China, and it definitely was like a low blow for me. But how I see it now is everything happens for a reason. It's God's plan, and I'm just gonna go with it and do what's right and fight for what's right, and that's kind of like what I feel in my heart, my soul that I need to do. And I just recently got doing a podcast with Mike Swick, and it's just like all the things I'm doing, fighting for the UFC, standing up for the Asians, for even the blacks, and then fighting against corruption in Kentucky for my girlfriend. It's just like,
And we will definitely get into that.
yeah. No, I'm just
A lot of
saying.
people don't.
I'm just saying,
A lot of
like,
people don't realize.
it's crazy that my list is like long. So.
Well, I mean, I myself consider myself a martial artist. I started off doing lots of Chinese martial arts. I fought in Sanda or Sanshao, which is how I found out about you back in the late 90s. I was participating in Chinese kickboxing tournaments as well, and not a lot of people knew about it. But wouldn't you agree that martial artists, they have this warrior spirit inside of them that even whenever they're not fighting in a competition or a match, when they're in the real world, they're looking for fights. They're looking for evil things to take down. Martial arts isn't just fighting another human being, but it's also fighting the things that we see in life that need to be shaped or taken down or changed. So how has this spirit of a martial artist translated into you fighting against corruption? Has your martial arts background helped you to have that motivation to do that?
I think the martial arts background and lifestyle does help, but I think all in all, it's my faith in God. There's a lot more than just like, being a martial artist and then standing up for what's right. It's got to be the human element, right? Because there's a lot of great martial artists out there, but at the same time, what they do with their skills is amazing inside the octagon, inside the ring. But what are they doing in life, right? So
Exactly.
everyone have their own journey, but it's what they're gonna do when adversity not only hits them but hits like the whole world, like what's going on right now, right? So
Absolutely.
I just I kind of just I'm going with the flow, and I kind of just it's almost crazy that everything that's happening, because like a lot of people who's experiencing the racism, experiencing all the different elements that's out there. I mean, hopefully they can be the change that they want to see or that other people want to see, right? But right now it's just from the riots to all the crimes from both ends, from the people and the law enforcement, and it's crazy.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the God element. I do consider myself a very spiritual person. And for any atheists who may be listening out there, even if you're an atheist and you don't believe in God, we still have this human DNA that binds us all together as a species. So everyone right now is feeling very anxious. Police are feeling anxious about how they're being viewed. Blacks, whites, Asians, all these different communities are on Twitter and social media arguing, with each other about who's right, who's wrong. Not all cops are bad. Some people are saying that, all cops need to be taken down. I mean, there's this whole spectrum of what's happening, and people are trying to find this equilibrium to sort of meet in the middle and find a real solution. But one thing that I really like about you is the things that you've been fighting for, especially with this case to fight for more fair pay and equal treatment in MMA and the UFC, is that you're finding a common cause that brings everybody together, and you're fighting for everyone. You're solution oriented, because you can only complain so much in your life, but eventually you have to take the skills and the energy that you have and you have to put it towards something. And it's okay to be angry, but eventually you have to come up with a plan and put that into action. So I think that you signing on also with this class action lawsuit took a really brave move for your career, because it could, hamper some future opportunities. Did you think about that consequence, that if I sign in onto this class action lawsuit, that it could hurt your career? Was that any fear going through your mind?
Um, you know, at, at the time there was um, more of um, the fact that the UFC, when they threw me underneath the bus, already started that crazy silence where like no movies, no entertainment was reaching out to me. So I was more I was more like I was more worried about like how am I going to put food on the table, and you know you know that was more it bothering me. But then um, it was almost like hold on, I'm sorry. It was almost where I felt like it was a test, right? God says, "What are you gonna do?" Okay, you no nothing. Your phone's not ringing at all. Are you gonna jump on, or are you gonna back off, or are you gonna pull off this? So it's almost like nothing was going on for me. No work was coming through for like 6 months, and then I was talking to Rob Macy, who put the whole thing together and got all the law firms together, and then Rampage was the one who brought me on, and I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. I went for it, even though that it could have probably, spin me into like a worse place, but I took the risk and I did it, and 5 years later we are much further, and we had our day in where we saw the judge and the two parties go at it. Then their lawyers presented their case, and our lawyers presented our case, and it was just a very happy day for the group of other UFC fighters, from John Fitch to Nate. We, I mean, there's Brandon Vera. There's a whole group behind us, but everyone who went out to New York and was a part of this from day one, it was very rewarding. And then so this happened like towards the end of last year, and now this year it should have been rolling already. But as you see what's going on, the pandemic has slowed and stopped like everything. But we'll see what happens. I put everything in God's hands, and I just move forward and I just go with the flow. So
So how long has this litigation been going on for this in total?
it's been like almost 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, you know what's really ironic is that you were inspired by the Muhammad Ali Act, where Ali was trying to reform boxing, which he did, and then his protest against the Vietnam War. He was going to be drafted into the Vietnam War, but he
yeah.
refused to go in, and he sacrificed his career. I mean, he was banned from boxing. He had his license revoked, and he went into exile. So, in a very small sense, you had your Muhammad Ali moment as well, because as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people may not realize this, but while you were signing in onto this class action lawsuit, you had a moment in your life where you were worried about your income coming into you are a father, feeding your children, taking care of your household. And I think sometimes the viewers, when it comes to watching fighters or social activists or anything, it's easy for us to clap and like and share and comment and those things, but you are a person with celebrity status, but you are a human being and you have hopes, fears, dreams. You get down on your knees and pray to God, just like many of us do. So I think that people need to humanize the sacrifices that these athletes make, to their bodies, to their families and to their salaries. And just from one martial artist to another, I greatly appreciate you signing on and the sacrifice that not only you but other fighters also who have signed on. And I honestly think, being a fan of the UFC, as far as the fighters and the actual competition, the business aspect of it and the contract and the legalities around it, I've never been a fan of it. And this is a guy I've worked in, as a paralegal and as an investigator, private investigator. I mean, for some time, I have a legal background. And the UFC just has all kinds of legal entrappings, but fighters fight. Fighters are not lawyers. They're not trying to pick through all these semantics. They want to do what they love and get paid fairly and have their health protected. And I feel like that since MMA is such a new sport comparatively to something historical like boxing, the passion of the fighters is being taken advantage of by the business model of the UFC. I mean, is that more or less correct?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, a lot of people, understand that fighters put their lives on the line, and the fighters who signed up, and signed the contract, they know what they're getting into. Hopefully, let me take that back. Not every single one of them. They're just so happy that they have a contract with the UFC, so they'll sign on. But if you look at what boxing is doing with the Muhammad Ali Act, it's like a open market for them, right? Whatever promotion's willing to step up and put out the most money for the fights, and then whenever the card goes on, everyone's getting paid fair. Then compared to what the UFC is paying their fighters, right? So a lot of fighters don't know, but then there's a lot of fighters that do know, but they really don't have an option to go anywhere else, right? So it's just like a boxing. If you don't want to fight for WBO, then you can go fight for another, boxing promoter. You're not locked into a contract. So I think that's the biggest thing. At one point, as you know, the UFC monopolized the whole market. They bought Pride, they bought WEC, they ended up buying Strikeforce, and there was nowhere for the fighters to go, and in boxing there's a lot of different promotion. I believe that even UFC is trying to get into boxing, and they're hopefully they don't try to mess with the Muhammad Ali Act, but like if they're going to get into boxing and they're going to pay boxers what they're worth, how come they're not paying the MMA fighters what they're worth? So it's ask that question.
Well, I mean, I really enjoyed, Scott Coker's promotions. I feel like the way that he dealt with his fighters. I mean, I know that you and Scott have known each other for a long time, and he just seemed to have much more of a rapport with the fighters, whereas Dana White was just sort of more stonewalled, and he's like, business is business. Do you know if Scott is planning to start any new promotions to maybe compete with the UFC, or is that kind of under wraps?
No. Remember, Scott is now the president of Bellator, right? So he
Oh
runs
yeah, yeah.
Bellator. So I think Scott's not about competing with the UFC. He's just putting on great fights, promoting the fighters, and doing what's right. He's more because Scott comes from a traditional martial arts background, right? So there's a different outlook, on on everything. So, um, that's the integrity of Scott Coker versus like a Dana White, right? So like Scott will care more because he was raised and groomed through Ernie Reyes, who's a great sensei, and who's got a lot of respect in the community and has a lot of amazing students. So there's a difference when you come from this background versus this background, and you lived your life as a martial artist rather than whatever Dana chooses or does with his power.
Yeah, Scott seems to put his credibility as a practitioner of martial arts first and foremost, and then business second. Whereas Dana White is just purely a businessman. He has no respect for the martial arts at all. Um, but switching gears a little bit, just sort of doing an overview of all of the battles that you've had in your life. You were a young martial artist and came up through this. I know that you and your first wife, you had how many children together?
Two.
Two. And then that relationship ended in divorce. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you had to go through that whole battle, continue your career as a martial artist, continue on through your life, and now you're in this lawsuit with the UFC to make things more fair for fighters. But I want to switch gears into another chapter that a lot of people may not, realize that you have been involved in a new romantic relationship with someone who's very dear to your heart, but unfortunately, she's found herself in a possible human rights abuse. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. My girlfriend's name is Spring, and she's very dear to my heart. I feel blessed every day that I wake up because God is great, and he, at one point I felt like, man, I'm done with any relationships. I'm just gonna take care of my kids and just go with the flow, and then God put me and her together, and then um, with everything that she's gone through, with everything that I've gone through, I think that we're going to stand for some amazing cause. And for her, she's dealing with corrupt deputy sheriffs from Boyd County, and then it's like a little ring out there. It's like Boyd County, Greenup, and Ashland, and I'm sure there's more
In Kentucky,
in
correct?
Kentucky. Yes, and then not only are they, it's just the deputy sheriffs, but it's the CPS, and not only the CPS, it's like a ring. Like I said, there's the judge, right? I won't mention any names, but so ever since that, I got really familiar with her case and understood all the elements that was going on, looked through all her evidence because she has mountains of them, and then I started figuring out what was the best approach to hit these corrupt, excuse my Vietnamese, motherfuckers out there, because we the people are paying their salaries, and we the people work hard so they're able to have a job, right?
And serve
So
us.
and the fact that if it was my kid and CPS did what they did to her, I mean, I'll probably be arrested because I don't care if it's a female or a male. Someone's gonna get, introduced to my shin bone, and that's
Well,
how I see it. The fact that they falsify evidence and everything that I'm saying is like on like public record. So
right.
I'm very keen to what's going on, and I understand the law because I've been in a lot of lawsuits, right? Uh, and I'm fighting for a lot of good causes, and I feel that with what's going on with my girl Spring, her case is a tough one only because the people behind the law are corrupt. So I know for a fact that once all this evidence is presented, man, where are they going to go? It's like, if you look at it, it's like an amateur fighter with no fights fighting a professional fighter with
Absolutely.
30 fights and they're undefeated. That's how much evidence we got, that compared to like how much skill the professional fighters with who's 30-0. We have that much evidence. And one thing about Kentucky is you can record someone without them knowing it and use it as evidence. So the amount
One
of
party
evidence
rule.
we have is like crazy. So how they've been able to get out of it is the judge, right? The judge will just sign off on everything. Then CPS, so they all collaborate with each other. And it's not just happening to my girlfriend. It's happening to God knows how many families out there. And now we have
Absolutely.
about a dozen plus victims that have came on to ask us for help. They want to join our fight. They want to give us their evidence. That's my dog, so excuse my dog. But yeah, so my job is, with everything that's going on, I'm gonna expose them, and I'm 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 so behind this that it's almost like personal, like well, it is personal, but I've made it like my own case. So now all the media that I can bring to the table is my first approach at this.
Let me ask you this: how many children are involved with your girlfriend's case?
Two.
Okay, so she has two children.
Yeah.
And you're talking to someone who is very familiar with this system. The CPS, the divorce law courts, civil courts. It's all a part of this family of courts called the family law courts. And I actually published a manifesto, a 42-page research paper that I sent to the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, talking about the family law courts. The main thing that I was focusing on in this report was divorce laws, and someone who's went through a divorce, myself, and and you've gone through one as well.
I actually got through two.
Through two.
Yeah.
In these courts, there's a lot of discrimination against men in these courts.
Yeah.
And I'll get to the women part later, but we talk a lot about feminism and female rights and these kind of things, and very important stuff. Women do get discriminated a lot in our society, but when it comes to these divorce courts, only about 10 to 13% of the time men get custody of their children, and then the average man has to spend upwards to $30,000 in legal fees just to get basic visitation, joint custody, and then you factor in child support, and then a lot of guys, they miss one payment, they end up going to jail, losing their driver's license, and then the effects that missing one of your parents growing up, children who grow up without a father and without a mother, single parent homes, it's proven that statistically the children do a lot worse. And then if you put them in foster homes or with other people, they do slightly better typically, but children do best when they are with their biological parents. And something that I uncovered, there's a federal law, it's called Title 42, Section D of the Social Security Act. and it says that for every dollar that the state collects in child support, the federal government will match that amount in the form of a grant. So as soon as you walk into a courtroom for a divorce or a CPS hearing, whatever, they want you to go to that courtroom as many times as possible, because every time that you go in there, you're typically spending legal fees, and then they go to the federal government. So in this case, it's in the state of Kentucky. So every time that they have a CPS case or a divorce or a child support hearing, whatever, they go to the federal government and they say, hey, last year we only had 1,000 CPS cases and 1,000 divorce cases. This year it's double. So now they are justified by the federal government to get a bigger budget, you know? So they want as many cases to come through in here that justify getting more funding for their departments. And in this manifesto that I wrote, it's called Global Human Trafficking in the Family Law Courts. In this manifesto, I did research all around the world. This is happening in Japan, Germany. It's a global epidemic. Even in Israel, there's a law called the Tender Years Law, where it says for the first 7 years of a child's life, fathers are not necessary. It's absolutely unbelievable. But switching gears into the CPS aspect of the family law court. So when it comes to divorce and child support and custody, that's where men get screwed over. But when it comes to CPS, typically that's where a lot of women get screwed over with false allegations. You know, you're outside playing with your kid, and you throw a basketball and it accidentally hits them in the head, and they get a little mark, and they go to school and a teacher sees it. Then all of a sudden, your kid's been kidnapped by CPS because allegations of abuse. And the number one victim of CPS is the Native American communities. And if I remember correctly, you were telling me that your girlfriend has a Native American background. Is that correct?
Yes, she's a white mountain Apache, and her mom's a shaman. So yes.
So did she grow up on the reservations or have any connections to the reservations at all?
She has connections to the reservation, but she didn't grow up on a reservation. Yeah, I mean, see, what you're saying right now is it's just crazy, right? It's hard to process. Like, what? Again, I'm just gonna swear, so excuse my Vietnamese people, everyone who's listening in. What the fuck's going on here? What is this world all about? And a lot of this protest. I mean, there's so many videos out there. Why are bricks placed around, stoplights so people can pick up bricks? Or why are, white or different nationalities spray painting, Black Lives Matter, and they're not even black, right? I mean, if you're going to protest, why can't it be peaceful? What is all this crazy violence all about? There's more to it behind everything that people is taking time to look into, right? So
well, Cung, we have to remember this, is that a lot of this is the media as well. So if there's a photo of a police officer and a protester hugging each other, that's not going to make it on the national news, because it doesn't get the drama. It doesn't get people stirred up. It doesn't get those views. And even whenever it comes to the family law courts, if a divorce happens, they don't make any money if both parties say, oh, okay, we agree on everything and we're going to do this civilly. The lawyers don't like that. They'll encourage you, no, you need to fight more. Like, you need to get more, because they want the process to be dragged out to get more money. Same thing with CPS. I've worked with some victims of CPS, and some things that I've noticed is that when people are trying to get their kids back or clear their names because of some false allegation or whatever the case may be, they have to go to these classes, these mandated classes, whereas sometimes they'll even have to pay the government for these classes, and you don't get your kids back until the government says, well, you've taken enough of our parental classes, so I guess you can have your kid back. Well, I haven't seen my kid in 2 years, and they've been living with this foster family. They're completely different now. I don't even know who they are. Could you imagine if someone took your children and put them in someone else's home for 2 years, and you had to fight through all these court battles And then once you get your children back, your children are going to look at you almost like you're a stranger. Like, I haven't seen or talked to you in 2 years. Like, who are you? I mean, so whenever it comes to her case, I know that you're going to be very careful about certain things, that you want to say, because there are pending things that are going on. But how long ago was the initial interaction with CPS?
I believe it was last July is when she's actually sitting here with me about 8 months now. But
Wow.
see the crazy thing about this, it's not about this case rolling through the courts and getting more so they can get more of a budget. The fact that this is being pushed by the deputy sheriffs that and CPS, they've taken away her civil rights, and where to the point where she can't even speak to her own kids. And it's been,
Wow.
I believe over 8 months since she's spoken to her youngest, and then her oldest, um, like the father just took away that right because she didn't sign over her whole rights as a mom to him. So it's just these are the things that we're dealing with, but with all the evidence that we have and with all the media that I'm bringing to the table, and then also, I've gotten some some other lawyers that's has joined on, and we're just assembling the army to go in and crush things.
So let me ask you this. If it's okay with your partner, if you don't want to go into it, that's fine. But um, what what was the initial reason? Where is all this stemming from? Was there a false allegation against her, or what happened?
So I mean, there's multiple facets to this, right? Um, first that the allegations of her being on drugs was meth, right? So here's how, excuse my Vietnamese, how lame and stupid these people are, because they've gotten away with it so long that they're not even covering their tracks, right? So I'm not sure if you understand anything about the meth and the levels of meth that's in your body. So first of all, she never took a drug test, but they have her on a drug test, and the fact that they probably use a cadabra that someone died of an 800 or 8,000, like being overdosed 8,000, whatever, uh, whatever the amount is. At 500, you're basically overdosed and dead. And for this, whoever they got it from obviously was dead, because my girlfriend should be dead right now if she was taking meth. And at 8,000, she's probably should have been dead twice.
Wait. Let me ask you if I'm getting this correctly here. So they never did a drug test on her,
They
correct?
never did a drug
And
test.
and they came up with this amount that was supposedly in her system, but they never touched her body.
They never touched her body. And
Wow.
and hold on, and then they had a paralegal act like they were CPS, had her meet at two different locations to do a drug test. And they basically, when she did show up, and she was on her way to, what's that place that your
Safe Harbor.
Safe Harbor,
I didn't even need
to be protected. And she says, "Hey, I have nothing to hide. I'm gonna go and do a voluntary drug test." And this was like at 7 at night, right? And she shows up, and literally a paralegal who claimed that she was CPS strip searched her and made her like turn around, you know, bend over, check her privates, and at that point she ran out. And here's another thing that's on the police report: she got in her car because she was scared to death, and her kids were in the car, and over 20 something cops surrounded the car, and they said that she was in a high-speed chase. Remember, this is in Boyd County, Kentucky, where there's two lanes one lane going this way, one lane going this way, and
Right.
one way in, one way out, literally, right? So unless she had a go-go gadget car, how did she get away from 20 to 30 cops? Unless, I mean, even the best driver in the world couldn't get away from 20 or 30 cops if you're pinned in an area. And so they said that she was in high-speed car chase, which we have the 911 calls that the car was grounded. And then she was recording the another deputy sheriff from Greenup telling her that he has a court order that supersedes her EPO, her prevention plan. Remember, she had a prevention plan, and this guy says, "Oh, I don't have it on me, but I have a court order, so I'm taking your kids." So he took her kids because she was surrounded by cops, and basically he didn't have that order in his hands, and later on they should figure out what they really want to pin her with, because they said she was on a drug, she's a meth addict, and she was on meth, and then she was in a high car speed chase, which we have all the 911 calls. There was no high proceed, a chase going down this, highway, followed by 20 cop cars or deputy sheriff's car, and how did she get away? How come they're not over here? How come they're not at my house?
So where does this CPS case derive out of? What county is this case being handled out of, or what court?
Boyd County. Boyd County.
Yeah. Boyd County.
Yeah. Kentucky.
Is that district court, or is it going through the family law civil court in
Family
Boyd
law.
County?
Family law.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, since she is next to you, when do they claim that this drug test happened? Because typically, if the government is administering any sort of drug test, it's because you're in custody, you have to go in some kind of office, there's usually cameras, it's being documented, you have to sign your name that you actually did it. So where's all this evidence that she actually did the test?
They don't have it. She ended up doing her own tests that night, and it's all negative. This is her.
Hi. I took a blood test the same night. So as soon as I left there, because they said that I failed a drug test I never took, so I went down there to the A+ drug screening, like probably approximately 8 p.m. And I had nothing to hide. They were going to take me safe harbor in Moorhead because they said I wouldn't be safe enough in Ashland, Kentucky. So because it was police officers, so who are you going to call, really? And then I went in there, and after I was strip searched, because I'd already been sexually, financially, physically violated, I never had, I paid $20 for this, so it wasn't court ordered. I had nothing to hide, so I was like, okay. I was freaked out. I lost my mind, and I've done my pre-law. I know that I have rights, but I had all my rights violated, and I just never thought that could possibly happen. And then when I ran up to my car, I didn't want to run because my kids are in there. I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? Because they said I felt it and I never took it. But she said she was going to have a man come physically from the jail. She said, actually, I have it on audio. It says an officer from the jail come check your, private parts. And I was like, no one's going to violate me anymore. And I went out there and I sat there with my children. And then I was surrounded by police officers. Now, here's where the contradictions come in. In court, the reason I had my children taken was because I was in a high-speed police chase. That my children saw this, and they were, they were all absolutely upset. And then they took my kids and gave it to my abuser. You know what I mean? And the other one, he had to go with someone else. It makes no sense. So, I'm looking forward to my day in court, actually, like in a real court.
So let me ask this. There's lots of different drugs that courts like to test for, marijuana, cocaine, meth, PCP, whatever. Why just that one drug in particular were you accused of taking? Was it your ex that accused you of this drug in particular? Or
I don't want to interrupt you, but I went to KSB Post 14 in Kentucky, and they told me not to, but, you have faith in the justice system. You just believe, the system works. And they said, go out of town, but I was like, nah, I'll just go there. And I told I'm sure I can say it's public record, Chris Carter, and he said it was so much information because my clients were telling me he was taking steroids and selling steroids. So I went and I literally gave them all the information I had on steroids, and then they were drug testing him for steroids, supposed to. But then the CPS told me in Greenup County they don't just test for steroids. So that's the funny thing is, like, you have to actually get like a different test, and she said it costs like so much money, and the state would have to pay for it because he wasn't on like heroin. I don't know what, all the pain pills or nothing like that. It's steroids, you know, and anabolic steroids. And whenever I left, then he, I guess, made an accusation that I was on meth, I guess. After I was on my way to Safe Harbor, which I found out later I could have done all that at Safe Harbor when I got there with my children. They asked me to go down to Greenup County at like approximately 8 p.m. and I didn't care to because I had nothing to hide. I didn't care. I thought I was just going to go. I've never taken a drug test. I was like, okay, go ahead. Let's just go. I took my kids with me. And then it was like I never gave a test, but they took my kids. So then I gave a blood.
So did I hear this correctly, that more or less one of your clients, you're a fitness coach, correct?
Yes, sir.
So as one of your clients got popped for something, and then they threw your name out there, and then you got tied up.
She told me that she came to me actually and said, why is your fiance at the time? She said, why is he selling steroids to children? So as soon as I found that out, because they're selling to high schools, and, you know, they're working at, he's a Boyd County Sheriff officer. I actually was like, I had two people coming to me, and, you know, they said, well, what happens if this kid dies? I was like, I have no idea about any of this. You know what I mean? So whenever I found out, I reported it. And when I reported it, then all of a sudden I got apprehended with just being meth. But although I had a Mayo Clinic, like my blood was taken the next night. I mean, like the same night, because I went straight to the doctor. And it came back 8 days later, though, and it was clean. I had nothing in my system. My blood is clean, but I'm a meth addict, I guess. Like 8,000 milligrams. I don't really understand that, but so I think they falsified, obviously, information. I never took a test that night. I should have had my kids taken. I never was in a high-speed police chase. It wasn't court-ordered. I was actually just on my way because CPS told me that I'd be safe. They said, come here, just do this on your way out of town, and we got you. We're going to save you and your babies. And I was like, yay, finally someone's listening.
So more or less, you had some clients, some people that you were working with,
Yes,
and they started feeling like they were maybe getting into trouble with something, and then suddenly your name gets, you know, thrown around, and your ex-fiance, correct? Mm-hmm. His name starts getting thrown around to get the heat off of themselves, and then suddenly you're tied up into this drama.
Yes, sir. I believe so.
And what do you think if these things are indeed, you know, falsified, what would you suspect that some of the motivations behind this, you know, may be? Or do you think it's just simply just government greed wanting to increase their caseload? What do you think the motivation behind this is?
You know, I have faith in the justice system, but you know, I live in a small town, and there's a lot of politics. I think that they don't want the whole sheriff's department to look bad because one person, or there's actually a lot. Pat Atkins on public record. He was the head of the drug unit. He's going to be going to court, federal court soon. And we have, you know, a lot of they're all corrupt. I mean, I'm not saying all of them as a whole, but it's like, I mean, they also told me not to call the police if, you know, and I had an EPO. I mean, I showed up for my court hearing, and they actually gave him a pass. He didn't show up. Then the next time I showed up, and they didn't give me the pass, you know, because I had so many death threats of, coercive threats and about my life. And I was so afraid to go to court because they said, you're going to get arrested, you're going to get thrown in jail and gang banged. Like, I have all the messages. And then, so I was so afraid to go because, you know, they dropped my EPO, and that was the only thing I felt like it was protecting me. And they had no reason to, you know, drop it.
Now, have you made any sort of complaints to, like, the Department of Justice or any human rights organizations? I mean, because a lot of people don't know this, but every state has a human rights commission. You know, so right now I'm in Tennessee, not too far from Kentucky, actually. So if something happens, you know, in your state, you can go to your state's human rights commission. Have you gone to the Kentucky Human Rights Commission or the DOJ?
Yeah, I went to the senator, too. She actually called me the next day, Robin Webb, and asked if I was okay. She said it was illegal what they were doing, and I asked her if she could help me. And she said, well, have faith in the justice system. It'll all work out. But how did it work out? And because that night they told me, the lady, Brenda Price, which is a paralegal, and I'll say her name because she works at A+ drug screening. It's public record. She's the one who strip searched me. She actually walked out there and told my mother, after she said, you'll never see your grandkids again. And I don't care about your race. I don't care about your tribe. You'll never see your children again. And I haven't since then. So,
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned, being a part of a Native American indigenous, tribe. There are a lot of Native American organizations out there that specifically fight for these issues of CPS. So even though you don't live on a reservation and you're not living directly in those communities, you may be able to find a lot of resources and help. I think one organization is called the Lakota Peoples Project. But what a lot of people don't realize is that, again, I know that you don't live on a reservation, but CPS oftentimes goes into Native reservations, targets them specifically because they live a different kind of lifestyle. The children might be playing outside barefooted or maybe, eating some food, on the ground from a paper plate.
Yeah.
And they call that child abuse. And then they take those kids out of the reservations and they put them in, American homes, and they end up getting their hair cut, their culture taken away. And it takes 2 or 3 years later to get your kids back. Like I told Cung earlier, if your kids are separated from you for extended periods of time, you start to lose that bond. And then whenever you do reconnect, there's this whole process that could take a year or two of reconnecting. And that's tragic. And if it did turn into a lawsuit, that's a lot of pain and suffering, lawsuit damages, right there. But this is a really huge issue. When is your next court date? Is this I know that COVID-19 is messing everything up.
Mm-hmm. They haven't had a court without me every single time. Every time I find out, it's past court. So we have we're going to take it to a federal level, obviously, but nothing in Kentucky that I know of that is coming up. But don't mean they won't have one without me. Because I didn't know they had CPS, where they check on them, because they separated siblings. Hey,
real quick, I don't know who this Lamborghini 06 is. You fucking idiot! Get off the tread before I fucking go in there and block you. This guy's an idiot here. It's starting to annoy me. What's all this emoji shit? Get off the tread, buddy.
Might have to block him off here.
Block his ass.
Yeah, sorry, but this stuff does happen. We have 12 other people that are gonna do a class action with us. There's a lot of people that happen to that have nothing, that have not done anything. A lot of mothers, and they keep me going a lot of times, because some days you wake up and, when my kids were separated, so not only do they take them from me, but until adults can work their issues out, there's 2 kids that are separated from each other, and that's all they've ever known. So now he's 4, he was 3 at the time. And then you have now he's 8 and now he's 9. It's if until adults work out their issues, if we're going to go to court and all that stuff, I don't care to battle, but keep them together, because now that you have emotional, that's his emotional well-being. Both kids, the one's old enough to know, the other one is still developing. And I don't want him to ever have any issues because I left a bad situation. So that's not.
Well, have you gotten your friends and family and gotten a huge support network around you? Because one thing that could help you a lot. I'm not giving you any legal advice or anything, but one thing that could come in handy, during these cases, is to get affidavits written up, notarized,
yes.
Preferably, and get those character assessment statements, written up and submitted in those courts, because at the end of the day, it comes down to evidence, and then it also comes down to being able to prove whether or not you're a danger to your kids. And if they can't satisfy those elements, then the case starts to fall apart. So it sounds like there's a lot of things going on here, and Cung is shout out to your partner Cung here. He has a really good strategy too, because you want to get as many people involved in this and sort of shedding light on it. And I would encourage you too, that since you do have that Native American background, and I'll send Cung some resources later, but there are a lot of Native American nonprofit organizations that do specialize in CPS work. And if you explain your case and what's going on, the more power, the more funding, the more resources, the more eyes that you can get on something.
Yeah, yes.
Just like what's happening right now with this whole protest about police brutality and these different things. The more eyes that you can get on something, the more heavily it can be scrutinized, and the more heavily it can be dissected. And the truth always wins out in the end. It might take longer than we want. Sometimes in the course of history, it takes hundreds of years. Like Cung is a Vietnamese refugee. Mm-hmm. And even to this day, in the year 2020, we're finding out things that happened back in Vietnam that we didn't know were happening initially.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So the truth is continuously coming out on all these different topics. So whenever we end this out, I'll definitely send Cung some resources and things that I know about that he can transpose to you, and I'll definitely write up a very simple article. I don't want to put too much information out there.
We don't mind.
Just because
the more the merrier. So your article,
okay.
It'll be great because we have facts to back it up, and we can send it to you. We have.
I'll try to get it published all over on my.
Well, what I'm going to do is try to get this transmission out to as many outlets as possible. If I have to be a nexus or a portal where things are starting here, but it's spreading out in all these different directions, that's exactly what you wanted to do here. We're sort of like creating a positive virus where you take this this level of energy and it's spreading out and it's multiplying, but instead of hurting people, it's helping people. Yeah. So that's what this transmission and broadcast is all about, because if you try to hide what's going on, then that makes you look guilty. But once you become transparent, mm-hmm. then the truth starts to leak out to a point that becomes overwhelming for them, and they have no choice but to fold under the pressure. And obviously, these are your kids, so you're not gonna, you're going to fight until you die, basically.
That's right.
As long as you use his platform, I have to commend him, because his manager at the time he saw it live, on the feed, and he's like, "Is that your girl? Like, live getting surrounded?" So, and he called me immediately. But every day he's fought for my kids and fought for me, and I appreciate him. So I appreciate he's taken on like all these other women. Now we have tons others. There's probably, like I said, there's men and women that are getting their children stolen by CPS in Kentucky and Tennessee. We have Tennessee too. And
it's as I was telling Cung earlier, this, when it comes to the family law courts, when it comes to divorce laws, child support laws, CPS, child custody, it's all connected, and it is a global problem, but it's a problem that's very underreported because these issues are very sensitive. Like if a guy misses a child support payment, he's not automatically a deadbeat dad. And just because a mother gets her children taken away by a CPS doesn't mean that she's, a bad mother. But people just assume these things on the surface, but more people are coming out and they're saying, hey, I'm not a deadbeat dad, or I'm not a bad mother, or this or that. It's all these factors that play in, and it's so overwhelming and it's so heavy, and people feel shame about these things. So they hide, and that stereotype gets reinforced. But more people are coming out, and they're talking about their struggles, what they go through. And a lot of people just don't know their rights. Whenever we go to high school, we don't have laws we don't have classes in law. We should, but we don't. So whenever we come out in the real world from high school, we're just sort of blind, like, hey, the government's here to, protect me, so I guess I'll believe whatever they tell me. So you go into court and start signing papers, and then suddenly your life is ruined. So I'm glad that there's people like you, people like Cung, who see that things aren't right, aren't fair, and they come out to speak. So we're almost running out of time here. We got about 30 seconds left on this transmission before it automatically ends. Anything else you want to say before we end out?
Just thanks for all the love, everyone. Thanks for the interview, and thanks for putting it all over on this right here all over your platform, and let's expose them.
All right, that was Cung Lee, everybody, and his beautiful woman Spring.